Wall Street Journal article out today about the ugly Treasury sale. The 30-year Treasury surged above 5% because there was an ugly 20-year sale today. And of course, stocks sold off too. And the narrative is the unsustainable debt crisis facing America. And there's no question that the debt crisis is serious and the specter of inflation is serious. But macroeconomics is much more complicated than one or two factors when it comes to something like bonds. So this article actually does a good job of pointing out something that I've been talking about, that yields can rise because investors see prospects of strong growth, a quote-unquote good reason for higher yields. So an easy way to think about it is when things are going really bad, bonds should rise in price. In other words, their yield should go down. And when things are going really well, the yields should go up because people are putting their assets in more risky places like stocks. And the reason I'm making this TikTok is because some economists say that the U.S. fiscal policy isn't solely responsible for the recent sell-off in bonds. Longer-dated sovereign debt yields are rising across Europe and in Japan. The latter has seen a notable sell-off in recent days. So, of course, U.S. debt should not be affecting the debt markets in Japan and Europe. And as far as my memory is concerned, before the whole Trump tariff sell-off, people weren't talking as much about the fiscal stability of the United States. Here and there it would come up, and everybody knew it was large and growing. But this narrative has really taken hold recently. And that's what a lot of financial journalism is about, and a lot of what markets are about, narratives. So I decided to throw this problem into AI and see what AI would say about various markets. I chose the 10-year Treasury because it's more liquid, and I felt like it was a fairer comparison across various markets because usually 10-year bonds are more common across all markets. And you can see in the United States it has indeed ticked up from 4.21 to 4.44, but in Japan it's also ticked up from 1.3 to 1.45. And in Germany, it's ticked up from 2.44 to 2.59. UK has been pretty flat. And Canada has ticked up from 3.2 to 3.3%. So there seems to be somewhat of a global rise in interest rates, which is more indicative of a risk-on environment, people putting their money in more risky assets such as stocks and crypto, than simply concern that the U.S. won't be able to sustain its debt. Again, don't come at me. I'm not saying that the fiscal crisis in the United States doesn't need to be handled and that we should, figure that out. However, usually these changes in something like bond yields is a lot more complicated than the financial press or pundits will admit. If it was simply a U.S. issue, that wouldn't be affecting bond prices in Japan or Germany. If anything, it might drive down the bonds in other countries that are safe havens because there's not that many places that are safe that you can actually park your money. And as I've said before, if the S really does ever hit the fan in terms of like a deep recession like 2008, the 10-year Treasury will be the flight to safety. It will absolutely be where everybody goes, and that will drive down bond prices. Again, this is much more complicated than just a simple one-factor story about inflation or a two-factor story about inflation and the fiscal situation in the United States. And there's an old saying that the bond market's smarter than the stock market. So right now, the bond market's saying that people have a big risk appetite as far as I can see. All right, drop your comment if you disagree.